We could go back to the map analogy. Like if you said, I'm going on vacation. Okay, great. Where are you going? I don't know. We're just going on vacation. Oh, okay. When do you leave? Tomorrow. Okay, well, why don't we decide on a destination? Well, out west. How about California? Okay, so you're going to fly or drive? Like, you have to have a plan. You can't just magically hope to be on vacation, whatever, enjoying the sands or white sandy beach without a plan. You have to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, and like how to actually do it, like fly, drive, whatever. And a budget's like that. It helps you reach your goals.
Welcome back to this episode of Theologically Driven. On today's episode, we're going to talk with Dr. John Aloisi about financial planning for pastors, future pastors, and seminary students. We hope this episode will be helpful for you. If it is, and you found it helpful, we'd love for you to share it with someone who also might benefit from this podcast. As always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if you enjoyed the content, please leave us a review that helps others find the show as well. With that, let's jump into the episode. Dr. Aloisi, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah. We thought this is a topic that you're very interested in and have done some work in before personally for your family. But we want to talk about financial planning, specifically with an eye towards guys who are currently in ministry. Yeah. And then seminary students who listen to this podcast and they're thinking about their future. Ministry isn't the most profitable of if you think of earthly goods, of vocations, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the reality of how it goes. Yeah. And so lots of times you need to have wisdom with how you plan, because number one, I think I've seen firsthand guys who have not planned well, so they end up staying too long in ministry, and I would imagine the church feels awkward because they know like it's brother, it's probably time to retire or move on, and but they don't want to hurt him because he's been their pastor for years. Right. So this is an area that can really catch up to guys if they're not careful. So I thought we'd take some time to talk through it. One important note is this is not official financial advice, all right? So we are not legally responsible for anything you hear in this podcast. This is just for information purposes only. We are not legal tax or finance experts. Go, talk to a financial advisor if you want to do that. But this is just some information you've gleaned over the years that I think would be really helpful.
Okay.
So as we think about financial planning, sometimes Christians can feel uncomfortable talking about money as if it's worldly to do so. What do you think financial stewardship, why is this an important topic for pastors or leaders?
Yeah, I think people sometimes have read things like the root of all love of money is the root of all evil, and so have gone, oh well, if I think about money too much, then that's necessarily sinful, or somehow it is just inherently worldly. There are parables about the rich man wanting to build bigger barns, things like that, and they think, well, I shouldn't plan, to advance or seek, to improve my financial situation, lest I be like that guy. But the fact is, we're all stewards. One of the requirements of a pastor or potential pastor is that he manage his household well, and I think that includes not only people but also property, things. Yeah. Not just relationships, but resources, finances, etc. And we're all stewards, not only pastors, but all Christians are stewards. We live in a world created by God. We're His creatures, and we're responsible to steward parts of the creation that He's put under our responsibility, and so we need to do that well. Yeah. We can be poor stewards or we can be good stewards, and we need to seek to be good stewards. Yeah,
I think around this topic, one thing, since you're the church history guy, one thing is kind of was an interesting thing I had not thought about, but if you look at like Spurgeon or Luther, there's stories about these guys are supporting younger men who are coming to be students with them out of their household finances and things like that. And it might be an obvious point, but I had not thought about it in the sense that we tend to think about the pastor and his salary is just kind of like just for him and his family, but they're clearly using the money that God has given them to help, to be of help, and to minister with it. Right? There's wise financial planning. It's not just I've got to survive, and there may be situations where that is the case.
Right.
But I think we can think strategically about how can we, just like any other, our time or attention or whatever, any other resource God has given us, we have a responsibility to manage it and use it as best we can.
Right. And as we talk about financial principles, a lot of them would apply. Most of them would apply regardless of your circumstances.
That's right.
Anywhere in the world. Now, we live in 21st century North America, honestly, in a fairly well-to-do, we might consider ourselves middle class or whatever. But we live in a fairly well-to-do area, and there are certainly people struggling in other parts of the world. But some of the basic principles can be employed regardless of where you live, of living within your means and planning for the future.
Yeah. So thinking about some basic principles, if there was only one principle from the conversation today that someone walked away with, what would you want that to be?
Yeah. I think probably the most important thing, the takeaway would be spend less than you make and invest the difference in assets that tend to appreciate and produce cash flow.
Okay.
It might sound kind of complicated. It's really pretty straightforward and simple, though.
Right.
You've got to live within your means. You must spend less than you bring in. And then with a surplus, you invest that wisely. Invest that in things that will help you down the road.
Yeah, yeah. And that's important because the person who's not spending less than they make, by implication, then you're going into debt.
Right.
And the Bible actually has a lot to say about debt, right? The borrower is the slave to the lender.
Right.
Doesn't mean all forms of debt are sinful.
Right.
It's just pointing out the reality of the situation. If you owe someone money, at some point you got to pay it back.
You must repay it.
Right.
I mean, I don't think filing for bankruptcy and just trying to eliminate your debts is really an option for a Christian. I mean, I understand there are corporate things where people need to reset terms and such, but for a Christian, if you borrow, you need to repay.
Right.
Whether that be a student loan or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. So trying to be wise with how we handle this. So the big takeaway there is spend less than you make and invest the difference. Yeah. All right. So many pastors and ministry workers, kind of like what we were talking about, won't really expect to earn a high salary. So now in our context, people tend to think about, I work for 30, 40 years or whatever, save for retirement, and at some point I retire. And at that point, in theory, you're financially independent. Is that type of thinking, number one, biblical, but also realistic on a pastor's salary?
Absolutely. I think they can. Ultimately, behavior matters more than income. Pastors have usually not the highest of incomes, obviously, but there are people making well into six figures who live essentially paycheck to paycheck and really are not in a good position going forward. Like if they lost their income, they would be in trouble very quickly. And pastors, don't have to know the most about finances, don't have to, have gone to school and become a CPA or something, or, take all kinds of investment classes. But if they embrace and implement basic principles of biblical stewardship, they really can plan for the future and be in a position where they can provide from themselves and be generous to others.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's with finance stuff, it can seem very overwhelming. Like at the beginning, I had to give a little disclosure, like this is not financial advice, because people can get into trouble not knowing some stuff, but it's actually really, when you boil down to it, spending less than you make and saving it is not that complicated.
It's not.
It's a behavior and a discipline.
Yep. And there are details about what you do with the surplus, but I mean, honestly, if you spend less than you make and even just threw it into a savings account, you'd be better off than people who are spending more than they make.
Exactly.
Spending more than you make is just a recipe for disaster down the road.
Yeah, and it's fun. I went through a phase early in my 20s where I was trying to learn a little bit more about finance. You're out of the home, you're an independent adult, so you got to learn some of that stuff. Yeah. I listened to some of the shows where folks would call in, talk about their financial situation, and it's interesting that you'd listen to a call from someone who they're making the six figures. And I know this is anecdotal, but this would happen all the time, where someone is making a ton of money, but they've got so much more debt, and they're trying to work to figure all that out. And it's like, okay, well, in 5 to 10 years, you can have it paid off or whatever. But then you'd get the folks who'd call in, and someone would say, like, oh yeah, I'm a teacher, and my wife does some other job that they're not bringing in six figures. I mean, maybe collectively they are, but they're not bringing in a high salary on their own. But it's like we've been saving for 20 years, and we're in a pretty good spot. So it's more simple than I think sometimes people make it out to be. So getting into some of those things, I've heard you talk a little bit about net worth and cash flow. Can you explain those terms and why they're important?
Yeah. So net worth is kind of like figuring out where you are. So if you want to go somewhere in the country, and you have a destination in mind, you need to know where you are right now in order to get there. Like if you had an atlas, I grew up with, we didn't have GPS, but we had atlases when we went on vacation, and you pull out the atlas and, you got to figure out where you are. You need to know which way you're going on the interstate. If you're going west when you're supposed to be going east, it makes a big difference.
Right.
And so people need to know where they are. And net worth just refers to what you have once you subtract your liabilities from your assets. So your assets, home, car, bank accounts.
The current monetary value of those things.
The monetary value of those things, and you subtract any debts you have from that, and that would be your net worth.
Yeah.
So it can actually be a negative number. I mean, for probably people coming out of college, sometimes it is school debt without any assets to speak of.
Right. So like just to do simple math, let's just say you had, just trying to think of simple, but let's say you had $10,000 in a savings or in a savings account, and you had, let's say you owned a home that was worth $100,000 and you still had a mortgage of $50,000. You would say 110 minus 50, $60,000. Yeah. And that's it. That's your net worth.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Just to know where you are. I like to track it from year to year. So that you can go, this year we whatever. Because if that number's going down, you're going to get in trouble.
Right.
So that number should be going up from year to year. Now the stock market can throw that into, the market drops 20%, and it's going to be difficult to have that number go up in any sizable way. But it kind of tells you where you are. So net worth tells you where you are, and then cash flow tells you what direction you're going. So that is income minus expenses equals your cash flow or your cash flow margin.
Okay.
So what you have as surplus at the end of the month, just to pick a time period. So you bring in X amount of dollars, you subtract everything you spend from that. You should still have money left over.
Right.
If you don't, you're going into debt or you're spending out of savings.
Right. And that's important because not all assets are liquid.
Right.
In the sense that if you run into cash flow problems, you could kind of get messed up. So, if you think like you pay your insurance, maybe some people pay it once a year or every 6 months or something like that. Do you have the cash to cover the expenses that are coming in so you don't get messed up that way?
Playing for the future, yeah. Staying at least a few months ahead, going, I know when my paychecks are landing, I know these bills are coming. Yeah. Around here, we have summer taxes coming up in just a few weeks. Yeah. Well, it's substantial. Right.
Yeah, especially in Allen Park. So, all right. So that's net worth and cash flow. Those are important to think about. I think another thing that's important with net worth as well, especially for guys, we want to think about seminary students a little bit too, is you have to keep in mind the compounding of these things over time. Yeah. So at first, it seems like things are moving very slowly.
It does.
But then you kind of start to hit a few milestones. Yep. So don't expect too much, don't overestimate what you can do in 5 years versus what you could accomplish in 20.
A couple decades.
Yeah, right.
All of a sudden you can look back and go, I surpassed these goals or whatever.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, that's good. So then what are some healthy financial goals that Christians, especially pastors, should be pursuing? So we think about biblical stewardship of our money that God's given us. What do we need to be doing with it?
Certainly being able to give and to give to your church and to believers in need at times just directly would be a goal that pastors and all Christians really should have. As well, financial independence in the sense.
Can we real quick? Can I go back to that before we move on? Because I don't want to harp on this too much. I will say that is one, I think, downside of a very popular financial step plan that's out there, which I really like and appreciate all the work that's being done. But in the plan, the last step is the be generous step, which I know what they mean by that. It's like now you've kind of built up the foundation, and so now you can you can more freely give away money. But when we look at Scripture, it seems like it's not so much about how much you have and then you give out of a surplus, but actually the first fruits go to the Lord. And then from there is then you take care of the other stuff. Yeah. Do you agree with that? Do you think differently?
Oh, I do think that,
you know what I'm talking about? So
I think giving really should be a high priority. It's something we probably all need to work on. Honestly, it's like prayer and evangelism.
Giving.
It's one of those things that we all go, we should be better at this,
right.
And feel a little guilty. But that certainly is an area that, honestly, if you're living paycheck to paycheck or going into debt or just in financial trouble yourself, it's very hard then to have a friend who has a financial problem,
right.
And to be able to help out.
Yeah.
So being able to do that, being able to be generous, especially with your local church, but other needs that you become aware of, as well financial independence. That is being able to cover your bills in the future, planning for the future. Like you're going to have needs down the road. Mm-hmm. If you don't die, you get older. At some point, you probably should not be serving in the church for a salary. And so your salary is going to come to an end. Well, what happens then? I've seen pastors continue to receive a salary after they've actually retired and brought on a new pastor. And there are exceptional circumstances and things like that. But generally speaking, that to me,
in fairness, though, if a church set it up that way from the beginning, the pensions of old, that would be. We're not saying that's not legitimate.
Yep.
But the thought is, you don't want to be in a situation where you are a continuing burden,
right,
to a small church that maybe couldn't afford it.
Right. You just need to be in a position where you can pay your own bills and not. I mean, God is wealthy.
Yeah.
He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. It doesn't make sense for his people to be like, I just can't, I'm struggling here. I can't pay for this. And life circumstances are different. There are accidents and, children who need extra medical care, all kinds of special circumstances.
Absolutely.
Putting all that aside, though, we should be playing for the future so that in older age, we're not having to go, I need help.
Right.
Sometimes people get in that position. We should be helpful to them.
Right.
But we should be planning so that we are in a position where we're able to pay our bills.
Yeah, no, that's
and
good.
Be generous.
Yeah, so being generous and then planning for the future, financial independence. So many people have probably heard of what you call the 4% rule.
Yeah.
Can you explain that? Why is that used in retirement planning? What is that?
Yeah. This is pretty commonly used in financial planning. William Bengen, back in, I think it was 1994, published an article in the Journal of Financial Planning in which he asked the question, what is the rate at which a retiree can withdraw from his retirement accounts that will last at least 30 years given a variety of market conditions? And so he went back to the 1920s when the S&P was first created and ran scenarios for every single year. You retired in this year, you retired in this year, you retired in this year. And you had a mix of half stocks, half bonds. So how much could you withdraw on an annual basis and not run out of money for 30 years? And he found 4% was the number. Now, he's actually come back and he's said, generally people can withdraw a little bit more than that.
Right.
But let's stick with the 4% to be conservative. What that means, practically speaking, is that if you can figure out how much you want to have an income once you have stopped working a W-2 type job, if you know how much you need to meet your needs, what your bills add up to or whatever, your desired income, multiply that times 25, and that's basically what you need to have saved up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I have a question about that because that's something that is a little confusing, though. So let's say you have like an investment account or whatever.
Yep.
If the S&P, I think, is averaged 10 to 12%.
About 10, yeah.
Over the past, if you stretch it out.
Yeah.
So why just the 4%? Why couldn't you, in 10? Theory, if you have a lump sum and you took out 10%, which would be the growth from that year, you could keep the lump sum and it would continuously produce. Now, there's ups and down years.
So this is where history helps.
Okay.
Actually, so it's he was accounting for a sequence of return risk, which is, say you retired in the year 2000.
Okay.
The first decade of this century is sometimes called the lost decade.
Okay.
If you actually look at the returns of the U.S. stock market over the first 10 years of this century, they were negative on an annual basis, something like 0.95%. like basically 1% down a year on average over the first 10 years. Well, if you retired in the year 2000 and you were withdrawing, say, 10% a year for those 10 years, and the market actually did not return anything over the course of that 10, you'd be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Bengen wrote before that.
So in theory, then, if you do the 4%, over time, you wouldn't have taken out enough to really hurt yourself, and it would go back up, is the thought.
It would still not be a desirable time to retire into a terrible bear market or something. But he did account for the Great Depression. Oh, wow. Because he went back to the early 20s. Actually, I think 1926. But, 1929 would have been a terrible time to retire as well. And yet... I think the worst portfolio performance was it lasted 33 years. Okay. Given all the different years he tried.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that can help people, if you think about your circumstances, lifestyle choices, that kind of stuff, you kind of have an idea in mind, okay, here's the number we're thinking, and you can do the math to figure out, like, all right, so what should be a realistic financial goal for us that way?
Though people do need to take into account inflation. Like somebody in his 20s needs to recognize that, maybe he goes to his first church and they're giving him X amount, let's just say $30,000 or $40,000. He can't plan for, I'm going to need $30,000 or $40,000, 40 years from now, because that just won't be very much. 40 years from now.
Yeah. Even if you think about $30,000 in 2019 versus $30,000 in 2026, significantly different on as far as purchasing power goes. All right. So then as we think about, we've got our goal in mind about what to move towards there. What are some financial habits then that will most often prevent people from making progress?
Well, obviously spending more than you make, but how that actually works out is often recurring expenses. So spending little bits that you don't really add up. Oh, I actually blew $150 this month on coffee.
I feel personally attacked by that example.
I love Kazaz over here, but you go in there and you order a latte and pay the tip, and you're spending like $10.
It's a lot of money.
So, spending little bits. So David Bach wrote a book about this, The Latte Factory. I've had a number of my kids read it. Yeah. It's been criticized about, we can have our avocado toast, and he's overdid.
He's like this. We stopped eating avocado toast and we bought a mansion or whatever.
Right. So you can overplay that. But the reality is, especially when you're young and in that building phase, just throwing money into investments. Honestly, and being very careful with your expenses. And related to that, a lot of young couples, maybe guys, spend too much on houses and cars early on. That is, they buy too big a house. They don't recognize that, the house their parents have and they're, at 50 or 60 is probably not what they bought when they were 22 or 25.
Or it's certainly not in the condition it is now.
Yes,
They bought a fixer-upper and they've worked on it over time or whatever.
Right. Or spending too much on cars. Just assuming, my parents drive a 3-year-old whatever. I should drive a 3-year-old whatever. Yeah. And no, their income, they're at a certain level, and that's not probably where you should be. So spending too much on cars or too much on houses. And sometimes people excuse the spending more on a house. Well, it's an investment, whatever. Well, sort of. It will appreciate more, probably, but it also is going to cost more every year. We talked about property taxes. Property taxes will be higher. Utilities. A day like this when it's 100 degrees out, keeping that thing cool, paying insurance, all of that just costs more. And so buying too much too early.
I think it's important. It's important to recognize what are the things that will actually appreciate, what actually moves the ball forward, and what's just kind of like, this is a creature comfort kind of thing. And I think what sometimes, I've found myself thinking this is like, like a coffee or whatever, that's a very low entry point to an immediate reward. Whereas saving the same, actually, I was looking at it. If you just put $50 in a retirement account, you assume the average thing, you'd end up with it was like four plus grand over the course of 30 years.
Just for the $50.
No, it's just the $50. Like it's nothing. But you think about it, over time, those things add up. That's right. Yeah. So it's important to recognize what actually is going to move the ball forward here. And like a car, that's a depreciating asset. So you're really, it's nice to drive a nice car, but does it really help move the needle on what's important?
It's a necessary evil. So, it costs money. I've told my kids this, that when you buy a car, it's going to be a hole in the bucket, in your savings bucket. Like,
Right.
you're going to have to fix, the brakes go or whatever, you're going to have to fix it.
That's right.
You're going to have to pay insurance, all that.
Yeah. No, that's good. Those are helpful.
You don't need it.
Any other habits that prevent people from making progress?
Yeah, I think sometimes this is more related to the investing side of things, but sometimes people chase the latest and greatest whatever.
Yeah.
People have different ideas about, say, cryptocurrency or whatever. Whatever's in the news. It's not in the news so much when it's down, but
Right.
but when it's soaring high, envy can actually be a real vice that harms your finances.
Yeah.
Like who was it that said? I forget now who said it, but nothing is so difficult as seeing your neighbor, get a new car.
Yeah, sure.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Basically, it's very hard. You're content until you see someone else get that, and then
where
all of a
they're
sudden it's
at.
like, oh man, our cars get kind of whatever.
Right.
So kind of chasing after
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
The flashy articles, whatever's in the news or
Yeah.
things you see around you.
Yeah, and we were talking before we started recording, but just about how stocks and things like that, it can be easy to chase those things, and sometimes you might get a return on something if something's on the way up, and that's fine. It's you have to decide where you're going to invest your money, but you just have to be careful not to be chasing a fad versus like a long-term strategy of actually saving money.
Yeah. I actually had a young guy ask me recently about investing in SpaceX before it went public.
Yeah,
He was like, so should I do this? And I was like 20 years, I think he's about 20 years old.
Okay.
And I said, I don't plan to. I put most of our investments go into index funds.
Okay.
But if you don't have any money in the market, it wouldn't hurt to open an account. And if you have a few $100s that you want to buy some SpaceX stock right away, I'm not going to buy it because I really don't know what it's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know what their earnings are. I have no idea. But I said, if you have a few $100s that you feel like you can spend, go for it. Do it. You'll get started. At least you'll be doing something, which will put you ahead of your peers. You'll be getting the ball rolling early.
Yeah, yeah, and that's important too, because what we were part of that conversation before this is, you have to be careful to assume public perception of a company when you start talking about buying single stocks. That public perception is equivalent to what the stock price will do, because I gave the example about Apple recently with some of their new announcements, how the announcement and the new products they were pushing actually are really good for the community who's enthusiastic about it, but the stock price went down, right? And you would have thought it would have jumped up. That's how I would have thought it. But that's not always the case. People who are financial analysts they're looking at supply chain stuff and profitability, and there's the shortage on RAM prices are up right now. So those are things you have to keep in mind. That you probably, we're talking about guys who are seminary students or pastors. Yeah. You don't have the time all day to read financial reports. No. You probably don't know quite as much as you think you might know.
I would say the vast majority of people in general just should not be picking individual stocks. I mean, mutual fund managers who do this for a living, pick stocks for a living.
Right.
Something like 80% of them underperform the market average in any given year.
Yep.
And even those who beat it, the 20% or whatever that beat it, rarely do so for more than 1 or 2 years in a row.
I was going to say it's probably impossible, or maybe it's not impossible, but a lot of those guys probably aren't consistently beating the market.
Right.
So
exactly.
that's something you have to keep in mind there. Yep. So those are habits that can prevent people. Another habit that can really help people is budgeting.
Yeah.
And so you'll hear, if you're reading finance books or thinking about this at all, why do you think budgeting is such an important part of financial freedom?
Yeah. We could go back to the map analogy. Like if you said, I'm going on vacation. Okay, great. Where are you going? Mm-hmm. I don't know. We're just going on vacation. Oh, okay. When do you leave? Tomorrow. Okay, well, why don't we decide on a destination? Well, out west. How about California? Okay, so you're going to fly or drive? Like, you have to have a plan. You can't just magically hope to be on vacation, whatever, enjoying the sands or white sandy beach without a plan. You have to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, and, like, how to actually do it. Like, fly, drive, whatever. And a budget's like that. It helps you reach your goals. When we were first married, we had a fairly detailed budget. We weren't right down to putting dollar bills in envelopes, but it was pretty detailed in a spreadsheet and updated every year, a couple times a year sometimes. But and over time, we're not quite as tied to it, but it really was helpful to go, all right, we're not going to add that item because we want to have X amount at the end of the month and be putting this away into savings. And actually, it was up here. Before we bought our first house, I brought our budget to the guy who was the business manager at the time, and I showed him our budget. And well, he saw the GMAC line, and he assumed that was car payment. I was like, no, that's savings. Like, we're saving up for. He was like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, you actually do have this money in your budget. But how would we have known if it was just like, yeah, money comes in, money goes out. We don't know.
Right.
We really don't know what we can afford. If you go to the bank and ask them what you can afford, they're not going to tell you the right answer. They're going to tell you way more than you really can afford wisely.
Right.
As far as getting a mortgage.
Yeah, you have to think. I mean, their incentive is the interest payment on the loan they're giving you. So the bigger the loan, bigger the interest payment.
And real estate agents will be the same. They're great real estate agents, a number of whom are friends. But the tendency is to have you buy as much as you can afford, not to.
It's trying to push the limit on it, basically. Yeah, no, that's good. I think the budgeting thing is helpful because I was thinking two things for guys who are more like towards my end of the spectrum here on this scale here. As younger guys starting out, it can be helpful just to know what's being spent. So in an age where we're moving away from cash and transactions are largely digital, and it can be easy to just hit. I mean, I was book shopping the other day. I mean, I think I bought 2 or 3 books without even really thinking about it. And I had to go back later and think like, okay, which book did I buy? Or not which, but how much was each one or whatever. It can be quick to just roll through some purchases and have no idea where the money's going. Right. And then you end up at the end of the month trying to figure it all out. And it's like, well, where's all the money going that we're spending? A budget can be helpful, number one, to track what's being spent. If you actually take the time to look like, okay, we budgeted this much and we actually spent this much in this category, but also plan for what you intend to spend. And a mindset shift that was helpful for me for this, and I know everybody's not going to agree on budgeting, but at least something that was helpful for me is a budget is not a limitation on spending. It is permission to spend.
Right.
So if I say, hey, I can spend $50 on books this month or whatever it is. That is not, don't think of it as, well, I only get to spend $50. It's, I am allowed to spend
I can safely spend $50 on
I can
books.
go blow $50 on whatever book I want, all the books I want. And that is, I think, helpful. And especially if you've got 2 people in the relation, if you've got a couple, having some accountability that way of this is what we're budgeting for can be a helpful thing.
Yeah. Through our 20s and 30s, we write down every single credit card transaction in a notebook, like every amount.
Interesting.
And then file away the receipt. And we don't do that anymore. It got to be really tedious after a while. But it was helpful.
Well, they have apps that can do that for you.
Right. So anyway.
So we use an app that basically tracks all the spending, and that's helpful because the coffee example that you brought up earlier. Right. So it's like no secret that I really like Starbucks. But that can be one that, you're absolutely right. It's like how much you spend can get away from you a little bit.
Absolutely.
But forcing yourself to track it, to see it like, okay, we spent, X amount or whatever, it can be helpful, especially if you're trying to, as long as you've got that long-term plan, you need to know, okay, are we actually doing the things we said we would do? Right. So.
And I mean, as long as you're spending less than you make over time, you're just going to have more flexibility. You're going to be
absolutely
in your 20s. Most people, you need to be really, really careful. Super careful. But if you're careful through your 20s and your 30s, you can loosen things up just a little bit, and just a little bit as you go along because you just have more flexibility as time goes.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. Those are helpful. So a popular, an influential guy who honestly has done a lot of great work, was very helpful for me. early on, but is Dave Ramsey, and I'm sure people are familiar with him. And he's influenced a lot of Christians in the area of finance. Where do you agree with his approach, and where might you differ a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate Dave Ramsey. I think he's helped millions of people get out of debt.
Yeah.
I think he's just been very helpful, and especially for younger people, if people have consumer debt, read Dave Ramsey's Tool Money
just do the
Makeover,
plan.
whatever, do it, and get out of that consumer debt. Over time, there are a number of things he says that I don't agree with completely. So just if you are reading Dave Ramsey, here are a couple of caveats. He downplays the importance of a credit score and basically says it's not important because you're not going to borrow money. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, you probably will to buy a house. Just realistically, most people aren't going to save up to pay cash for a house.
Yeah.
And so you're going to want to get a mortgage. You need to have good credit. Even if you're renting, you need to have a good credit score. Most landlords are going to have a minimum credit score.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, I mean, I've turned people down.
Yeah, I was going to say,
many
have you guys run into that situation where
tons of people?
Yeah.
We look at the credit score very carefully, and delinquencies and all that.
Yeah.
But just lack of a credit score is a red flag. And it impacts what you pay for insurance. House insurance and car insurance, the rates you pay are impacted by your credit score.
Right.
So a credit score does actually matter. So that's an area where I feel like he gives advice that is not ideal.
Okay.
With regard to paying down debt, he gives advice that I think is helpful to people, though it's not mathematically the absolute best.
Sure.
That is, he
tackle the largest amount first versus
the smallest debt.
That's right.
The
Sorry,
smallest debt.
The smallest amount versus the largest interest rate is what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mathematically, it's best to go after whatever debt has the highest interest rate.
Yeah.
But practically and psychologically, a lot of people will benefit from doing what Dave Ramsey says.
Yeah. And in fairness, at the beginning of the episode, we talked about behavior being more important.
Yeah.
And I do think, so speaking from personal experience, when I finished up undergrad, I had student loans from that. And the way the student loans break down is if you're looking in the dashboard or whatever online, it had, 4 or 5 loans over the years and then the amounts. And I remember when Emily and I first got married, we worked really hard and we paid all those off in a year. Wow. And I remember seeing those amounts. And it was encouraging to we knocked out one. All right, let's move to this one. We're going to hit this one. All right, we knocked it out. So I tend to be more on the Ramsey side of that, even though I know mathematically maybe we could have saved a couple $100. But yeah, so I have found that to be helpful.
It's kind of fun to have goals that you hit.
That's right,
and that leads to hitting goals quickly.
And if you're a obsessive box checker like myself, then it's really like it's a double whammy there. So what else about Ramsey? Where would you differ?
Those would be the two main areas. He does tend to send people into his his network of investment advisors.
Yes.
And I think most people would be better off just going to Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab and putting money into a Roth IRA and more specifically into index funds, broad-based, low-cost index funds.
Yeah. So this actually would be a good point to bring this up. I wanted to talk about this at some point. Again, this is not financial advice. Yeah. So we're just talking between the two of us here. But I do see that where people will get pushed into financial advisors. And we already talked about the guys who are paid to pick mutual fund stocks. Rarely beat the market. And if they do, they don't do it consistently. Right. So to me, I mean, the low point of entry is honestly, I have both, I've used Vanguard's system and Fidelity. Yep. I find the Fidelity one is a lot easier to use. Okay. So for a young guy wanting to get into this, I think just go sign up with Fidelity. It's free. You can do it from the app on your phone. Yep. And you can start putting money, just like what you talked about, into a Roth IRA. Pick a good index fund that basically is trying to hit the market. Fidelity has a big one that you can look at. Again, not financial advice. But that is an easy barrier to entry. It's a lot easier than I think some people think it is.
Like literally you can be set up in probably 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, it takes no time at all.
It's very easy.
Yeah. Since we've talked about some technical terms, can you explain Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA? Yep. What's the differences there? And then 401k, that sort of stuff. So if I wanted to move towards the investment side, okay, I want to start planning. Even a pastor who might be moving, further into ministry, if you've not done this or started this, you really should.
Yep.
So, and then even if you're already doing it, there could be some way to reallocate some assets. What's the path forward there?
So a 401k is basically a retirement account tied to your employment, usually at a secular job. So Ford, Starbucks, whatever. You work for them, you have a 401k program you can opt into or not, usually, like people could. If there's matching money, that is the way to go. Like
That's right.
100% return usually, guaranteed before investment return. Like they're giving you free money. You should totally be doing that. 403b is just the nonprofit equivalent of that. So churches can have 403bs, schools and stuff. There's a government equivalent as well. An IRA is an individual retirement account. That is, it's not tied to your employment. So you can just set that up on your own. You do need to have income to be contributing to it, or your spouse does at least. But an IRA is very much tax-wise like a 401k.
Right.
A Roth IRA was only created in...
So real quick, I don't think you mentioned it, but the whole point of these, instead of just going on, opening a brokerage account, buying whatever stock or investment or whatever, these are tax sheltered in some ways. So the 401k, the 403b, and the traditional Roth, the money goes in pre-tax.
Correct. Right
so
now.
It's, you don't pay
taxes this year.
You don't pay income tax on it now. And that can give you a bit of an advantage. When you withdraw at retirement, that's when those are taxed. And that's the difference between the Roth. So that you explain that.
Honestly, though, many pastors, especially if they start having a few kids, are going to find that their tax liability may be on the low side.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe quite low.
Right.
And so the tax benefit is not huge. And that's where I think most guys in their 20s or 30s would be best served to open a Roth IRA.
Agreed.
And that is right now, there's no tax benefit this year. You know, you put in whatever, $3,000 and you pay taxes on that $3,000.
And this is money out of your paycheck that you've already paid income tax on.
It goes to your checking account and then you send it.
In theory, assuming you actually do have tax liability.
Right.
But,
and so the money goes into there and you generally don't access it till you're at least 59 and a half. Kind of a weird
Is that
date,
what it is?
but that's
Okay.
Congress, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you pull it out, you pay no taxes on that. It does not count as income, taxable income.
Right. So all the growth over time that's accumulated there, you don't pay taxes on it. Whereas if you had, let's say you'd bought the same index fund, mutual fund, whatever, in a brokerage account, that would be taxable income when you take it out.
Yeah, and you may have tax liability as you go along. I mean, it pays out dividends if it's not a retirement account. So you throw it into an index fund, it's paying 1.5% a year or whatever in dividends. You're going to end up paying taxes on those dividends and any capital gains, which are pretty minimal.
Yeah. So again, for guys wanting to move forward on this, thinking about wise biblical stewardship, again, this is very much centered in our context here. Yeah. What's available, this year in America. But it's very easy to just go on one of these, open an account, and then just start putting money away, little by little, and that can be a helpful habit to build up over time.
Yep.
One other important thing that I think will come up as you begin to do this, obviously you start to track it a little bit more. You start to notice ups and downs in the market. Some people will try and time the market. So even within their investment account, it might be like, I've got everything parked in a money market and I'm waiting for it to dip and then I'll dump it into whatever. How do you think about that?
Yeah. People should really automate their investments as much as possible.
I agree.
On the spending side, it's good to avoid automatic bills like subscriptions and things. Mm-hmm. On the investment side, you should automate things as much as possible so that money is coming in every month and it's going out automatically to retirement, to savings like an emergency fund or a saving for a new vehicle or whatever, some high yield savings account where you're saving for future needs that are fairly near term. Yeah. And so that's not in stocks, that's just a savings account. Right. But automating retirement savings and any other investments is really the way to go.
Yeah, and the important thing in there is it helps to build the discipline because it just automatically does it for you.
Yeah, you really don't see it. You don't feel it very much.
Yeah, versus if you're waiting to the end of the month and it's like, okay, well, how much do I have left over now? Well, maybe you spent a little bit more than you thought or whatever because the money was there. Yeah. Now you got to make a tough decision about what to do.
Oh, I'd rather spend the $200 on this.
Yeah,
I'd rather, do this fun thing.
Right.
But a lot of this is about discipline. It's about playing for the future and just realizing that by playing for the future will be much easier for
Yeah,
you.
agree. So specifically thinking about pastors, are there financial issues that guys in ministry, guys going into ministry need to think about?
Yeah. Some churches still have parsonages. If you go to a church that has a parsonage, I actually don't, it's not a deal breaker, I think, but I don't think that's ideal for churches to have parsonages for the pastor's sake, because he's going to miss out on building equity in a home.
Yeah.
Many people, their largest store of resources ends up being the equity in their house.
Yeah.
And if a pastor doesn't have a house, he, all right, he's ready to retire at 60 and needs to move out of the parsonage.
Right. Well, now it's
What's he
not.
gonna do?
Now it's not the value of the house plus retirement accounts. It's just the retirement accounts minus I've got to go buy a house.
Something,
right?
right?
Yeah.
So if someone goes to a church that has a parsonage, they need to be saving even more, just recognizing that they may not be there forever.
Right.
They probably won't be there forever.
Right. That'll be an expense coming up in retirement.
Another thing would be housing allowances. Some churches provide for housing allowances, which it enables you to set money aside for housing expenses without paying taxes. Just say, read up on that, look into it.
Yep.
It can be helpful.
Yep.
And then opting out of Social Security would be another issue that guys face sometimes, the option to opt out Social Security as a minister.
Yep.
And my advice is generally not to. Some people do it, some people don't. I'd say if you do opt out, you need to be saving more.
Yeah.
Because although I plan for the future as if there is no Social Security, I'm still in. I could have opted out, I'm still in. But I plan as if there is no Social Security program, but there will be. There will be when I'm 60, apart from, nuclear
They keep trying
holocaust.
to,
It's just politically unfeasible to eliminate it.
Right.
People talk about we're going to run out of money. They're just going to have to reduce benefits.
Right.
So there will be benefits down the road. Right. Almost inevitably.
Yeah.
It's about as sure as death and taxes.
Yeah.
There will be benefits down the road. Whether the program should exist or not is
Completely another
different
discussion. Yeah, right.
I have my opinions. So if someone opts out, then they need to be planning for the future, have probably more life insurance because Social Security includes survivor benefits and all kinds of things. So they just need to be real careful if they choose to opt out.
Yeah, no, that's good. So someone listening to all this, someone who's maybe in ministry or moving into ministry, they may be feeling overwhelmed. And hopefully we've tried to simplify it enough to where recognizing it's more about behavior, not as much, knowing all the details of some of this. But what are some practical first steps they can take?
Yeah, I think it goes back to figuring out where you are, knowing where you are. Do I have, an emergency fund? Am I ready for the car to break down and need to put a $4,000 transmission in it? That's happened to us 3 times in the last 15 years, where we've had to shell out, a significant amount of money to replace the transmission. So do you have money set aside for that? If you don't, that's a good place to start, by putting money into an emergency fund. Next, you need to figure out where you are as far as cash flow. Like, are you moving in the right direction each month? Do you have money left over at the end of the month? Or are you setting aside money intentionally right now? If you're not setting aside money intentionally right now, you probably want to automate something.
Yeah.
Whether that's going into a savings account. If you don't have a retirement account going, you should open that up. You mentioned Fidelity, great place. Yeah. Incidentally, they have a very good credit card that gives you 2% cash back. Fidelity. We really didn't talk credit cards, but the short is be careful with them and pay them off every single month.
Yes.
Just automate that. That's one thing to automate, pay in full every month.
Yep.
So open up an account and start setting aside money for the future, probably in a Roth IRA is where most guys are going to want to look.
Yeah, and this can be helpful too. I mean, we mentioned Dave Ramsey before, but he's got some very simple baby steps. So I would say if you've got student loans or you've got some debt you need to pay off, those can be helpful to get through it. Just give you some really practical steps to do that way. Another one I would say, for guys just starting out, if you're trying to figure out what to do, start budgeting, have some type of plan, and then if you've never done it before, try tracking your expenses for a month just to see like, okay, this is, I might think I'm spending X amount at the grocery store, but if you've never tracked it or looked at it, I guarantee it's higher. it's just how it is. So not that it's wrong to spend that more money or whatever. It's just you need to be making a decision about this is how much we're going to spend.
It needs to be intentional.
That's
you
right.
need to know what you're spending.
Right.
Yep.
So trying to figure some of that out can be helpful and move forward that way.
I would say some couples probably don't talk about money as much as they should.
Sure.
So if you don't, in many relationships, probably one is a saver, one's a spender.
Yeah.
We are fortunate that neither of us is really much of a spender, but both should understand what's going on with their finances. Sometimes the husband knows, it handles all the finances, and the wife is really in the dark. And then something terrible happens, and she is left trying to figure out. She has no idea. Oh, we had this, we had that, whatever. How do I find this? Passwords and get into these accounts.
In most, I won't. I'll plead the fifth on spender saver, so I don't incriminate myself or anyone. But it's helpful to at least be on the same page and have a general idea of where stuff is.
Yep.
I mean, because early on, we made a joke about if Emily had to pay the credit card off at the end of the month, it's like she wouldn't even really know what to how to get to it. So it's good. It's good to be on the same page about some of that stuff. But then the other thing, and I've heard Pastor Jordan say this before, and I thought this is so helpful. I can't remember if he was talking about budgets, but it was the general idea of having a contract. So if two people, so if you take a couple and they decide, okay, we're going to start getting serious about our finances, so let's do a budget together. Well, now it's not just me and you saying, oh, you said you wouldn't spend that, or you said you would spend that. It's we are agreeing. Like it brings a third party into the discussion. Yeah. So it's not like, oh, you told me wrong or something like that. It's you didn't do what we clearly agreed to here. And it can be easier to have some of those discussions and helpful to try and stay in bounds on some of that.
Yeah. We sit down every January shortly after the beginning of the year with basically our finances, accounts and stuff. And I handle all our finances. My wife is very informed, but I pay the bills, et cetera. And handle investments. And so we sit down early in January and look through how did things go last year. Did we hit our goals, things like that, and where are the goals for the next year? Yeah. And talk that through. Oh, we'd like to increase giving, or we should be doing this or that. Yeah. Or things that are fun things for the family. Oh, we'd like to be able to do this. Yeah. What will it take to be able to do that?
Yeah, and is that realistic? How much do we need to set aside? Yep. That sort of thing. So, well, good. Thank you, Dr. Aloisi, for coming on. I hope this is helpful for guys in ministry as they're thinking about finances. Unfortunately, this is just one of those areas where guys can get really tripped up on. When you think about guys who have had problems in ministries, this is unfortunately one of the topics that comes up. Definitely. And so we want to make sure that we are maintaining integrity around our finances and planning wisely. So thanks for coming on to help us with that.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Theologically Driven. Theologically Driven is a podcast of Detroit Baptist Theological Seminary. If you'd like to learn more about our seminary, you can go to dbts.edu.